discussion of the research methodology 1, which was discussed by Group 1. They tackled about research design, population and sampling, and research instrument. And now, we, the Group 5, will discuss the research methodology part 2.
Good day, class! For today's agenda, I know that every one of you are doing research paper. That's why the topic of the lesson for today is about the validity of instrument. So first, who among you know the definition of instrument in research methodology?
Research validity in surveys relates to the extent at which the survey measures right elements that needs to be measured.
That's right! In simple terms, validity refers how well an instrument measures what is intended to measure. In research, there are 3 ways to approach validity, and they include concept validity, construct validity, and criterion validity. Furthermore, there are 5 key sources of validity evidence. These are evidences based on test content, response process, internal structure, relation to other variables, and last, consequences of testing. After discussing the validity and its principle, let's now see and learn about the 4 tests involved. Instrument development are concept identification, test construction, validity testing, and reliability testing. Only with reliable and valid measures can true relationship and differences can determine an effective intervention programs be formulated.
IOC identification of concept is very important. In that very early design stage of an idea, the concepts are defined and identified to follow the correct research and design path. In item construction, the grammar, diction, spelling, punctuation, and syntax must be correct and exact. It is distressingly easy for a test item written to inadvertently convey hints, biases, prejudice, opinion, or confusing information. Validity testing. Validity refers to how accurately a method measures what it is intended to measure. If research has high validity, that means it produces results and corresponds to real properties, characteristics, and vibration in the physical or social world.
Do you also know, students, that validity can also be divided into 5 types? The first is the phase validity, which is the most basic type of validity, and it is associated with a highest level of subjectivity because it is not biased and on any scientific approach. In other words, in this case, a test may be specified as valid by a researcher because it may seem as valid without in-depth scientific justification. For example, questionnaire design for a study that analyzes the difficulties encountered in online classes affecting the academic performance of students. This can be assessed as valid. Each individual question may seem to be addressing the specific and relevant aspects of students' academic performance in online class.
Wow, I am so overwhelmed about this lesson.
Yes, you're right. Did you know the other type of validity?
No, Mom, what it is?
Okay, construct validity relates the assessment of suitability of measurement tool to measure the phenomenon being studied. Application of construct validity can be effectively facilitated with the involvement of panel of experts closely familiar with the measure and the phenomenon. For example, with the application of construct validity, the extent of the difficulties affected affecting the academic performance of students in online class can be effectively assessed by devising questionnaire to be answered by students and asking questions about the extent of the difficulties they encountered in online class.
Moreover, criterion-related validity involves a comparison of test result with the outcome. This specific type of validity correlates result of assessment with another criterion of assessment. For example, the nature of customer perception of brand image of a specific company can be assessed via organizing a focus group. The same issues can be assessed through devising questionnaire to be answered by a current and potential customer of the brand. The higher the level of questionnaire between focus group and questionnaire findings, the higher the level criterion-related validity. Are you guys follow?
Yes,
Terrific! Thank you! So one of the type of validity is formative validity that refers to the assessment of effectiveness of the measure in terms of providing information that can be used to improve a specific aspect of the phenomenon. In connection with this, we have sampling validity, which is similar to content validity. It ensures that the area of coverage of the measure within the research area is vast. No measure is able to cover all items and elements with the phenomenon. Therefore, important items and elements are selected using a specific pattern of sampling method depending on aims and objectives of the study. Are you guys learned about validity? With that, let's move forward with another lesson, the research procedures.
Doing all the process and knowing the different types of validity, we can now put in our research paper, Chapter 3, the validation of the questionnaire. The research will prepare letter of validators who can improve the questions after that period. Adjustments will be made in response to the validators' comments and suggestions. The teacher lends it to the statistician for data collection of instruments approval. The statistician prescribes the appropriate statistical treatment with the assistance of advisor. The questionnaire was refined and prepared.
Good morning, everyone. Teacher Madeline went to a seminar. That's why I'm your teacher for today.
Ma'am, we are in the middle of doing research paper. Specifically, we are in the research procedure. Can you help us on how to understand the research procedure?
Awesome, Shira. That is our scheduled topic for today. With that, sit there and listen to me very well, as I will discuss about the research instrument. First, let's define what is research procedure. A scientific procedure means a procedure through which a given task related to research in reaching the research aim is successfully implemented. A scientific procedure is based on certain methodology. Its content is supported by the methodology. That meaning of a scientific procedure is successfully reach the research aim. At the same time, a scientific procedure means implementation of research method. In research procedure, we have a research process. A typical research process covers the following stages.
Selecting the research area. You are expected to state that you have selected the research area due to professional and personal interest in the area, and this statement must be true. The importance of the first stage in the research process is often underestimated by many students. If you find research area and research problem that is genuinely interesting to you, it is sure that the whole process of writing your dissertation will be much easier. Therefore, It is never too early to start thinking about the research area for your dissertation. Formulating research aim, objectives, and research questions are developing hypotheses. The choice between the formulation of research questions and the development of hypotheses depends on the research approach, as it is discussed further below in more details. Appropriate research aims and objectives or hypotheses usually result from several attempts and revisions, and this needs to be mentioned in methodology chapter. It is critically important to get your research questions or hypotheses confirmed by your supervisor before moving forward with the research paper.
Conducting the literature review. Literature review is usually the longest stage in the research process. Actually, the literature review starts even before the formulation of research aim and objective, because you have to check if exactly the same research problem has been addressed before. Nevertheless, the main part of the literature review is conducted after the formulation of research aim and objective. You have to use a wide range of secondary data sources such as books, newspaper, magazine, journal, online articles, and etc.
Selecting methods of data collection. Data collection methods need to be selected on the basis of critically analyzing advantages and disadvantages associated with several alternative data collection methods. In studies involving primary data collection, in-depth discussions of advantages and disadvantages of selected primary data collection methods need to be included in methodology.
Collecting the primary data collection needs to be preceded by a great level of preparation. And pilot data collection may be required in case of questionnaires. Primary data collection is not a compulsory stage for all dissertations, and you will skip this stage if you are conducting a desk-based research. Data analysis of data plays an important role in the achievement of the research aim and objectives. Data analysis and method vary between secondary and primary studies, as well as between quantitative and qualitative studies.
Reaching conclusions. Conclusions relate to the level of achievement of research aims and objectives. In fact, in this final part of your dissertation, you will have to justify why you think that research aims and objectives has been achieved. Conclusions also need to cover research limitations and suggestions for future research.
Completing the research, following all of the stages described above, and organizing separate chapters into one. Finally, leads to the completion of the first draft of your dissertation needs to be prepared at least 1 month before the deadline submission. This is because you will need to have a sufficient amount of time to address feedback of your supervisor. After the research process, we will now move on the data gathering procedure, wherein it narrates how the researcher administered the survey. Because of previous part, you narrate on how you form a questionnaire. This data gathering procedure will be guided so the flow of our research will be properly done. So there are sources of data. Primary data, it is a data that comes from survey, interview, test, observation, recording, behavior, or response of respondent. On the other hand, when we say secondary data, it is more on paper based on electronic data, like books, journals, articles. However, we as researchers need to use irrelevant information. We must not take an information from Wikipedia because the data formed there is not reliable. In this case, we can write this in our research paper, the data gathering procedure. The researcher will gather information from books, related studies, and other relevant materials from the internet that are connected to the study to finish question for instrument. After the questionnaire had been validated by thesis advisor and 3 experts in the field of research, the researcher conducted pre-survey which was participated by a member of the student from the name of the school to test the reliability of the questionnaire. The result of the pre-survey will report to the statistician who will determine the number of item questionnaire was reliable amount to be employed in this study. The reliability the test result in number. After conducting the pre-survey, the researcher used the Batangas State University library where the actual surveys would be conducted, including the college teacher education of students. The researcher, through letter, humbly asked the school principal of the above-mentioned school of total numbers of CTE students enrolled in their university. The researcher will gather the total population of 205 CTE students. In accordance with the statistician, the researcher will use Rousseau calculator to compute a required number of the student to be used respondent in actual survey, which is 134. Meanwhile, survey questionnaire using Google Form were made available for distribution after the questionnaire was modified and verified reliable and finalized. Before distribution the questionnaire, the researcher humbly sought the approval of the respondents to answer the survey. Lastly, the results were tallied and interpreted to make findings, conclusion, and recommendation with the assistance of the statistician. The data were analyzed through different statistical treatments.
It is so great how we finish these 2 topics, the validity and research procedure. And now, we will move to another topic, which is the statistical treatment of data. Now, guys, do you have an idea what is statistical treatment of data?
The term statistical treatment means to apply any statistical method to your data. Statistical treatment are divided into 2 groups, which are descriptive statistic and inferential statistic. When we say descriptive statistic, it is the summarize of your data as a graph, and inferential statistic, it is making prediction and test hypotheses about your data.
Wow! You are correct! Statistical treatment of data is when you apply some form of statistical method to a data set to transform it from a group of meaningless numbers into meaningful output. It explains all the relevant formulas for the analysis and the interpretation of data. And it is based on the statement of the problem or SOP and the research objectives to know the various statistical treatment of data.
Statistical treatment of data involves the use of statistical treatments such as mode, mean, median, regression, condition probability, sampling, standard deviation, and distribution range.
This statistical method allows us to investigate the statistical relationship between the data and identify possible errors in the study. In addition to being able to identify trends, statistical treatment also allow us to organize and process our data in the first place. This is because we carry our statistical analysis of our data, and it is generally more useful to draw several conclusions for each subgroup within our so that we can later break down our data in the same way for analyzing it.
For statistical treatment of data example, consider a medical study that is investigating the effect of a drug on the human population, as the drug can affect different people in different ways based on parameters such as gender, age, and race. The researchers would want to group the data into different subgroups based on these parameters to determine how each one affects the effectiveness of the drug. Categorizing the data in this way is an example of performing basic statistical treatment.
That's all for today. Goodbye!